Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our chats with Emily as we're calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition and we turn out a poem 409, They Dropped Like Flakes. Now, the they of this poem we believe to be soldiers. This will be one of the few poems that we will read that will have a direct connection to the experience of Emily and the American Civil War. When this poem was published in 1891, it's actually titled Battlefield. Now, it's difficult to know. Scholars struggle to understand Emily's relationship with the war. It is significant that in her letters during the time of the war, she makes 15 direct references to war. But of course, many of the letters that Emily wrote were destroyed by the recipients. She did say once, quote, "War seems to me an oblique place," end quote. She said that as much to Higginson. And it is interesting that more than half of Emily's productive poetry coincides with the years of the American Civil War from 1861 to 65. Now, her brother Austin was able to avoid the war by paying $500 to what was called a substitute. And this happened especially among those who had the wherewithal and the means to do it. But Austin was very close with Fraser Stearns, who was the son of the president of Amherst College, and he died in March of 1862. And Emily said this, quote, as she wrote to Sam Boyles late in March of 1862, quote, "Austin," her brother, "Austin is chilled by Fraser's murder. He says his brain keeps saying over, 'Fraser is killed, Fraser is killed,' just as father told it to him. 2 or 3 words of lead that dropped so deep, they keep weighing." Now, in some ways, we are back to poem 67. You will remember when we did this poem a while ago, "Success is counted sweetest by those who ne'er succeed. To comprehend a nectar requires sorest need. Not one of all the purple host who took the flag today can tell the definition so clear of victory as he defeated dying, on whose forbidden ear the distant strains of triumph burst agonized and clear." One of the few direct references to actual soldiers dying on a battlefield. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through the preceding 408 poems we just finished with 408, Unit Like Death for Whom. And if you have, then this poem actually will fit within the context of a number of other poems. Now, in this poem, we will want to identify the indifference of nature, right? This will take us back to our study of Stephen Crane's Red Badge of Courage. Also, I want to pay attention to the 3 similes, that the dying of a soldier is like snow, is like stars, and like the petals of a rose. Now, many have said that Emily is responding to a passage from her favorite book of the Bible, Revelation 20:12 through 15. Quote, "And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death, and whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire." Now, Emily is going to speak of soldiers and their death, and this is how she'll say it. "They dropped like flakes. They dropped like stars, like petals from a rose, when suddenly across the June a wind with fingers goes. They perished in the seamless grass, no eye could find the place. But God can summon every face on his repealless list." Now, that repealless list, of course, takes us again back to that Revelation 20 passage that we just referenced. Notice she doesn't say it's soldiers, which is fascinating. And of course, this would be one of the questions we could ask Emily if we could have a real chat with her. We would say, why didn't you just say soldiers? It is compelling, of course, that she will say it as they dropped like, first of all, snowflakes, which of course will land on the ground and then ultimately will melt. Or like stars, right? In other words, something so far away, dropping like stars, a falling star. Or like petals from a rose. We immediately think, of course, of Shelley's To a Skylark and the comment that he makes about roses. When, notice, suddenly, which may be the key word of the entire poem, across the June. Notice it's June and it's not April, when, of course, the Civil War began. A wind with fingers goes. Notice the personification of nature and the fingers of wind. Almost like death reaches out and will grab certain young soldiers, and they perished. Notice the language here, from dropped to perished. Right, in the seamless grass. You'll remember seamless from our study of 321. And of course, immediately with grass, we can't help but think of Walt Whitman's, especially his drum taps. Yes, and of course, we did all of the poems of Whitman's Leaves of Grass Deathbed Edition. And that list is at learnstrong.net under the title of Talks with Walt. In fact, the reason we call our series Chats with Emily is because of that series. And of course, you guys will remember our study, especially of drum beats, and the way in which so many of those poems elicited the same kind of view. They perished in the seamless grass. No eye could find the place. I mean, we immediately think of, especially Whitman's Song of Myself, passage 6, as a child asks, what is the grass? You'll remember. But, and then the whole poem shifts. Now, some have read Emily here as ironic, because of course we've seen this irony before. Is she being straight up about her view of God, remembering all the fallen soldiers, or is she being ironic? But God can summon every face on his repealist list. Repealist, by the way, only gets used one other time, and it's poem 565. We'll remind ourselves here. And of course, the list that she's referencing is that Revelation 20 list, right at the end of all things. Now, when we get to poem 444, we're going to play similar kinds of things. It isn't clear the other poems of Emily's that specifically are referencing fallen soldiers or the war. She'll say, though, in 444, it feels a shame to be alive when men so brave are dead. One envies the distinguished dust permitted such a head, the stone that tells defending whom this Spartan put away, what little of him we possessed and pawned for liberty. The price is great, sublimely paid. Do we deserve a thing that lives like dollars must be piled before we may obtain? Are we that weight sufficient worth that such enormous pearl as life dissolved be for us in battle's horrid bold? It may be a renown to live. I think the man who died, those unsustained saviors present divinity. Notice here she calls them saviors. And then when we get to poem 690, she'll say it this way. Many have attached this poem to her understandings of the American Civil War. Victory comes late and is held low to freezing lips, too wrapped with frost to take it. How sweet it would have tasted, just a drop. Was God so economical? His tables spread too high for us unless we dine on tiptoe. Crumbs fit such little mouths. Cherries suit robins. The eagle's golden breakfast strangles them. God keep his oath to sparrows, who of little love know how to starve. Now, the point I think here at 3A, or at 2A here, is a soldier's death is always a tragedy. Notice she doesn't make any distinction about the soldiers who will be fighting either for the North, the Union, or for the South, the Confederacy. At 2B, the language of war here, notice, dropped and perished, immediately come to mind. At 3A, we've mentioned, of course, Whitman, we've mentioned, and drum taps especially. Crane's Red Badge of Courage comes to mind. Of course, we could as well engage in our study of the Iliad, especially those passages in the Iliad. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net over all of the Iliad. Especially those passages that will, can we say celebrate, or can we say recognize the death, especially the young warriors? And then, of course, the other two poems of 444 and 690 that might be direct references to Emily and the war. Finally, at 3B, what are your views on the tragedy of soldiers' death, and to what degree is Emily challenging you? I hope so. Thank you.